What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Cut Podcast. This is where we chop it up with the world's finest. Today I'm here with...
Hey, what's up? I'm Jonathan Goodman. I'm an author. I'm a serial entrepreneur.
And today I'm going to be giving him a haircut while asking him those deep questions that you won't want to miss, guys. Check this out.
What's up? I'm Jonathan Goodman. I've got a podcast called The Obvious Choice. Built my career educating fitness professionals. Wrote books. Wrote the textbook for online fitness. Got a software company called Quick Coach right now. I'm excited about my next book called The Obvious Choice coming out with HarperCollins in January.
So, did you start off as like a physical trainer, or did you start off as an author?
Yeah, man. I was a personal trainer a week after my 18th birthday.
Okay.
I trained clients at the University of Western Ontario. You know where that's at?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Got to be a trainer full time, and then at 23 years old, started to write my first book. Self-published my first book at 24.
So, what made you want to like start writing books like all of a sudden, like from that at that point?
It wasn't writing books, it was figuring out a way to get out of the time for money trap is what it was.
Oh, okay.
I did pretty good as a trainer very early on. Got lucky, figured out a couple things that other people didn't understood, that the job is more about psychology than fitness. And so built good clientele, but got to the point where I don't know, you get tapped. Like, as a barber, you get tapped. There's only so many hours that you could work. So
Yeah.
I was there at night one night after another 11, 12-hour day. I was just sitting on my parents' red couch, still living at home at the time. And I was like, man, is this what my life is going to be like? So I started,
Thinking.
what did I do? I went to the bookstore and I looked up books on multiple streams of income. And I wrote down the names of those books and I walked across the street to the library and I checked out those same books.
Mm.
And I just started reading.
Yeah.
And I tested out a lot of stuff. I built a business plan for a smoothie joint, never started it. Studied residential real estate investing, never did that. And writing a book and selling information was just another thing in one of those books. And for whatever reason, it was just whatever took. Energetically, I got pulled towards it. But it wasn't a master plan. It was just,
Right.
it was that thing of all the things that I could have been doing that just felt right.
Okay. So, give me like insight on what it takes to actually like write a book. Like, what's the process? Like, what's the beginning to start?
You got to do something meaningful first. It's impossible to write an interesting book if you don't do interesting shit before you write that book. And I think that's the point that a lot of people miss with a lot of the content that's created these days is you just haven't done enough stuff with life yet. You haven't had success in business. You haven't met enough interesting people. You haven't seen the world or created or gained enough of a worldly view yet. So step one is to really not even think about the book, but go and live life, go on adventures, explore, try stuff, fail at stuff, meet people. And then as you're doing that, capture the stories. So have some sort of device. I mean, I use Asana. I'm not promoting Asana. It doesn't really matter what you use. But just, man, as I go about my day, I'm just capturing stories. Like, that was interesting. Like, why did they do that? Or, we're in Uruguay and there's a guy who comes on the bus. And he gets on the bus in Montevideo in Uruguay and he's selling something. In New York City, everybody comes on the subway and they're selling chocolates or whatever.
Yeah.
This dude was selling Band-Aids.
Okay.
He's selling individual Band-Aids. Okay. So my wife and I look at each other, my girlfriend at the time. What the fuck's this guy doing? Like, why is he selling Band-Aids? Then all of a sudden, it's Tanita, 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 he's saying, right? All of a sudden, some woman buys one. Single Band-Aid. Another woman buys one. Another woman buys one. He gets off at the next stop at the bus, walks across the street, takes the bus going the other way. This dude was just going back and forth, back and forth. We thought about it a little bit more, and then we're like, okay, well, like in Uruguay at the time, the women dressed to the nines. They were always very fancy. They always wore high heels, that type of thing. Meanwhile, the streets were all cobblestone.
Yeah.
These poor women probably had blisters all over their feet by the end of the day. So this dude on the bus is selling the perfect product at the perfect time to the perfect customer.
Yeah.
What a fascinating story.
Yeah.
I don't know when I'm going to use that, but I captured it, I wrote it down, and I might use it later. So the first step to writing, I think, great books is just to go out and collect these types of stories and store them. And that's reading different things, that's going out and meeting different people, right?
So in your book, you were telling me that you talk mostly about like physical like health, right? Like physical training and all of that, right?
So the majority of my career up until now has been education and support for people who work in fitness.
Okay. For
So
people who work in
for
fitness.
people who work in fitness, so personal trainers, nutrition coaches, gym owners.
Mm-hmm.
I created the biggest blog in the world for them. So we had 4 to 6 million people a year coming to our website back in the day. You know, it's like everybody now is talking about, it's like, oh, I spent $1 million on content. It's like we were spending $1 million on content for our blog from basically 2014 to 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And so we built up a big platform. And from that, we asked the community what they needed. And in that time, I mean, God, I've done it all, man. We put on 5 conferences, self-published 11 books, created 6 digital programs, and now I've created a software platform as well. But every step of the way, it was just it was building an audience and then actually having one-on-one conversations with people in that audience and figuring out what the biggest holes are, what their needs are, what's missing. And then we just went out and built it. So the next book that I'm coming out with is more of a general small business book. It's called The Obvious Choice. So it's not just for people who work in fitness. I mean, people who work in fitness will benefit, but barbers will crush it with this book, for example.
Mm.
But anybody in small business, basically anybody who's not trying to win the internet and be an influencer, and anybody who's not trying to build $1 billion startup.
Mm.
The ignored 98% of the rest of the business world.
Yeah.
The book is for.
Yeah. So wait, why do you think like a lot of like small business like owners like aren't like reaching it past a certain point in their career though? Like why do you think they're like stuck at that threshold?
I think that right now there's a lot of pressure to be somebody you're not. There's a chapter in the book called Let Your Geek Flag Fly. I think that what makes us different in our profession is not the 99% of us, and 99% of us that makes us the same. It's the 1% that makes us different. I mean, if you think about it, humans share 99.9% of DNA with every other human on Earth. It's that 0.01% that creates the magic, that creates the flavor, that creates the divisiveness, like everything, right? The good and the bad. And so within that, I mean, all of us have little geeky obsessions. All of us have something that makes us different and unique and special. And then there's other people who also share that. And so a lot of the time, what we're doing is we're trying to market ourselves based off of what we do and not what makes us different about what we do. So, you know, you cut hair, you do fades.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Cool, man. There's a lot of people who can probably do a fade, maybe even not as good as you, but in the customer's eyes, just as good as you.
Mm-hmm.
Because most customers, for most everything that they buy, are ignorant towards what they buy. Most humans are ignorant. You're ignorant. I'm ignorant. We're not stupid. Stupidity is general. Ignorant is domain specific. I'm ignorant towards what makes a good haircut.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way it is, right? So I can't accurately judge whether a haircut. I can't accurately judge whether a haircut is good or bad. That's just the reality. And so, as a barber, you have to understand that your success in your profession is not going to be based upon how objectively good you are at your field. It's just simply not. There is a point in just about every profession where the practitioner reaches a point in diminishing returns in their skill set or their knowledge towards a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes what makes him unique and how many other, I call them leapfrog skills, how many other complementary skills they can combine their central skill with. How good are you at money management and wealth management? How good are you at marketing? Maybe content's one of them. Similar to what you're doing here, right? This is what's going to set you apart.
Mm-hmm.
How good are you at presentation, at performance, at communication? And I think those are a lot of the things that are missing. So I think step one is to realize that being objectively better at what you do isn't enough to set you apart. Maybe if you're the best in the world, but for everybody else, it doesn't. And then number two is that there's a pressure these days to win the internet, for to center yourself based off of some sort of performative aspect to please the algorithm as much as possible. And I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but I think that there's two games that somebody can play. I think the first game that somebody can play is trying to become famous to the internet, and I think the second game is to try to build a business. And neither game is better or worse, but they're fundamentally different with different time horizons, rules of engagement, odds of success, and reward mechanisms. And you can't play by the rules of one game, call it the influencer game, and expect the rewards of the other.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So you think like let's say like someone's like mainly just trying to like please their like social media like side of things and like content side of things, you don't think they'd be able to hit like maybe like let's say like the financing side of their like life and stuff like that, or am I completely like
I think that there are outliers potentially who might be able to in the short term, but content's a long term game, right? Content's a savings account. You invest into it when you've got excess time and capital. You hope that it's going to kick off interest ongoing, but you don't depend on any interest kicked off or any revenue generated from it. And you hope that you're never going to need it. And then one day you wake up many years down the road and you're like, how the hell did all this money appear here? That's how this shit works. That's how you have to view social media. That's how you have to view content. It is a unbelievable asset to invest into, but it can set you down the wrong path if in investing into it, you're not actually doing the work to get better at your field and to generate business in the short term. It could be a distraction.
So do you think like content is still like king for a lot of businesses, or do you think it's like not needed for every one of these like businesses to do?
I don't think it hurts, but I think content is best used for the majority of businesses as a way to convert attention, not generate attention.
What do you mean by that?
So you create a social media account not to generate new eyeballs. You create a social media account to provide social proof, to provide answers to common questions, and to make it very, very clear how people can do business with you when they're ready. Knowing that the vast majority of people that are going to hear about you from somebody else, word of mouth, recommendations, potential advertisements, whatever else you're doing, knowing that the vast majority of them are not going to be ready to start or buy right now, and you want to be the obvious choice for them when they are ready to buy. Over 90% of sales are still offline word of mouth sales. Most everything that we buy doesn't happen because somebody sees a content piece online and decides to convert. Now, they might be following an account and a content piece acts as a catalyst, but it's not the reason that they were there in the first place.
So do you think it's like a just so like content is used for like a presence thing these days, or
I think it's a presence, and I think what you can do is you can actually use the same media engines, whether it's social media, whether it's a podcast. I think you can use the same media in a different way to build a stellar network, for example, to provide social equity to other influential people in your field or even in your neighborhood. You know, like if I wanted to build a neighborhood business and I was a barber, I wouldn't post videos on what makes a good haircut because rich people in my neighborhood aren't going to be looking for videos on how to get a good haircut. What they're looking for are ways to improve their own perceived self-worth and social standing in the communities that they care about. So what I would do is I would start a podcast that would be called something like The Best of Etobicoke, where I would celebrate the movers and shakers in my local community of Etobicoke. And then I would call up the top business leaders, cafe owners, massage therapists, all of the connectors in the neighborhood, and then all of the rich people in the neighborhood who own the businesses. And I would want to learn their story and I would interview them on my podcast that celebrates the most influential people in the neighborhood. Now, all of a sudden, I'm having a one-on-one conversation with these people who are all going to like me. Who the hell do you think they're going to go to when they need a haircut? And then I'm going to ask them to recommend me to somebody else, one of their friends, for an interview. And they're going to recommend me to somebody else or connect me with somebody else, which is a referral.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I build my business. And so I'm using media, I'm using content, but I don't care if I get 5,000 downloads because that's not the goal of it. So the engagement metrics that Libsyn or Spotify or Apple is going to give me on number of downloads or rankings on lists is completely fucking irrelevant. And the same thing with Instagram, right? The insights that Instagram gives you are insights for them to achieve their goals, which is to get you to stay on Instagram as long as possible. They're not insights that reflect your goals, which is to spend as little time as possible on social media to build as big a business as possible and then get the heck off of social media. They're fundamentally different games that each player is playing. And so you can't be angry at them. They own the platform. But you have to figure out how to use their platform for your goal.
Mm. So do you think like, let's say like brands like, I don't know, Nike and like all these massive like brands right now, like do you think they do the same without social media or no?
Nah, I mean, they're different. Well, Nike, I mean, yes. Here, let me take a step back. Peter Thiel, billionaire, first investor into Facebook, um, part of the PayPal mafia, investor in a lot of companies that you know of. One of the most influential Silicon Valley investors out there, right? Billionaire. His main philosophy towards business is that the goal of any business is to get to a monopoly as fast as possible. The way to get to a monopoly as fast as possible is to find the smallest available market you can possibly monopolize and then expand outwards strategically. And so if you think about Nike, Phil Knight, who started Nike, sold running shoes out of his Valiant, which was the type of car they had. It was a green Valiant at local track meets in Oregon.
Mm.
Nike started by a dude selling running shoes at local track meets out of a beat up Plymouth Valiant.
Yeah.
He monopolized the local track meets in the state of Oregon.
Mm.
And then he expanded outwards. PayPal started by monopolizing eBay power sellers. Facebook started by monopolizing Harvard students. And so on and so on and so on. Every massive company starts out, if they build their way up that way. Now, I mean, there's so much money in some startups that they can kind of blunt force, but my guess is you don't have $100 million in investment sitting around.
Yeah.
Companies start out by monopolizing smallest available markets. I call it SAMs, and then strategically expand outwards if they decide to. Most people, though, never actually need to. Because if you monopolize your local network, if you are a plumber or barber or personal trainer or whatever you're doing, restaurant owner, you're going to live a stellar life. You're going to be highly profitable. You're going to have no stress. You're not going to deal with all the other nonsense that people trying to win the internet or people that take large amounts of funding and have to appease investors have to deal with. Again, there's different choices. Some people have much, much bigger ambitions, but most of us don't. Most of us want to live a good life with their family. They want to do their work. They want to be proud of the work they're doing. And then they want to go home and not worry about payroll, man. I've done that. I've lived that life. Sleepless nights, worrying about payroll. Sitting at my computer eating cheese and crackers 12 hours a day. Not eating any real meals, skipping workouts. And I built something much bigger than what I have now. Wasn't worth it. Some people decide it is, but for me, it wasn't.
What's your like idea of a good life?
I mean, what I'm living now, if I'm completely honest, things are going at a good pace. We live 4 months of the year out of the country. Spend every winter in Mexico. This year we split Mexico, Nicaragua. I've traveled 4 to 6 months of the year every year for the last 12 years. 2 young kids. I don't miss a single breakfast or dinner with them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm skipping 3 days of work at the end of this week and beginning of next week to take my son to Legoland. Just him and I as a daddy son trip.
Yeah.
My dad and I went to Oaxaca City for a week. Different type of daddy son trip a couple months ago.
Yeah.
My wife and I have a date night every week. We don't have to worry about money. We've got lots of different types of investments that we don't stress about. They're safe, they're reliable, they're hedged against one another. I mean, to me, freedom is control. And control has a lot to do with what I call reducing your walking cost. Systematically, over time, I want to be able to walk away from anything I'm doing with as little punishment as possible. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to walk away ever. What I'm doing right now, I want to, writing books, I want to be able to do till the day that I die. But I might decide one day that I'm done with it.
Mm.
And so, knowing that I can step away from anything, that I've reduced my walking costs that much, I'm not indebted to anybody, I haven't taken in loans or investment. Um, I'm not. Uh, I'm not trying to build something super, super big, which is the trade off. But at the same time, it's complete freedom to be there for the people that I really love and work out as much as I want to work out, which is everything to me.
So, what do you think is a huge mistake that most adults right now are making, like with their like lives and careers?
Oh, I don't know, man. I don't knock anybody for the decisions they make as long as they're making them knowingly.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got their own reasons. I have a personal philosophy that everybody is doing everybody is acting right based off of the decisions they've made, the information that they have, and the biases that they've attained over time. And so I don't think anybody's stupid. I really don't. I don't think anybody's wrong either. There are people whose political and religious and ideologies I don't agree with, but it doesn't mean that I think that they're wrong. I truly believe in my heart that in their minds they're acting with their best of intentions for the people that they care about the most. Even like objectively evil people in history that have done atrocious things. If you read their diaries and their journals and their accounts of why they did what they did, and you put yourself in their hands, you can start to rationalize their decisions pretty quickly.
Mm.
And that's one of the reasons why I love to travel so much and why I love to meet people from so many different places is because you learn to empathize with people very, very quickly. So I don't know. I mean, I think people should say yes more and should say no less. There's a lot of advice out there that says something to the tune of if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. I think that that's really bad advice.
Mm.
Um, I think that when we say yes to something we otherwise wouldn't say yes to, we enter somebody else's world.
Mm-hmm.
We start to experience things that we wouldn't otherwise experience. And what that does is it expands our bands.
Mm.
It expands what we have access to. It expands what we know. It expands our creative energy. And that allows us to see a lot of problems in a much different light.
So, when you're creating all your books, right? Like, how is it a really like fluid process for
No,
you? Like,
God, it's the hardest thing that I do.
mm-hmm.
Writing, anybody who tells you that writing is easy is a shit writer. Because when I think about a topic, even if it's something that I know really, really well, I think about it based off of what I already know to be true. If I'm writing a book for somebody else, I have to empathize with the reader and assume that they have no prior knowledge of this thing or understanding of this thing. And so I have to provide them that while simultaneously keeping them engaged, telling a story, and making sure that it's meaningful enough and easy to apply enough for them to achieve whatever the promise of the book or the chapter or the statement or whatever that I'm trying to do. That's an unbelievably hard thing. I do think that all of my years personal training helped with that. Because what you do as a personal trainer is you effectively present a subject to a customer many hours a day, all day, every day. And it helps you figure out how to be succinct, how to explain things to people in a way that they're going to understand it. Writing books is unbelievably hard. Um,
So what's the
Something I take very, very seriously, but it's by far the hardest thing that I do.
what's the best advice you have for like beginning authors?
Beginning authors gain a lot of interesting experiences, learn to tell a good story, and read lots of fiction. If you write nonfiction, stop reading nonfiction and start reading great fiction. Because what you have to say is not going to be anything unique. There are very few things in this world that haven't already been said 100 times in books.
Mm-hmm.
There's fewer things that actually matter. Because the foundational truths are already out there in the open. The job of an author is to say things in a way that's going to make people that haven't previously got it finally get it and do something with it in a way that's going to change their life. And the way that you do that is by learning how to tell a really, really good story. And most nonfiction, the genre is really dependent upon the ideas. Fiction, the success of a book is dependent on the ability to tell a good story. If you have good ideas, you're not going to stand out in nonfiction. But if you have good ideas and you learn how to tell it in a compelling way with good storytelling, you're going to stand out in nonfiction because most nonfiction does not have that. So read as much fiction as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And study storytelling. Watch great comedians, for example. Watch how they weave stories. We went to see 2 weeks ago. We went to see Dave Chappelle here in Toronto.
Really?
He announced it 4 days before he arrived here. We got tickets the first night. We sat about 10 feet away from him. It was a tiny little like comedy club atmosphere.
Okay.
And the thing about Chappelle is, yes, he's a great comedian. Yes, he's hilarious. He's got the stage presence, but he's one of the best storytellers I've ever seen. He'll hint at things, or he'll make jokes and then revisit them later on in the show constantly. So watch that. Pay attention to why you could say the exact same thing as somebody else, but the way that they said it, the tonality, the cadence, the way that they introduced certain items and then revisited those items, how they do those things. Study that.
Have you ever thought about being a comedian?
No, I mean, I love comedy. I love watching comedy. I love listening to comedy. I love going to comedy shows.
Mm-hmm.
No. I've thought about studying improv comedy, not
Okay.
stand up, but I've
Yeah.
thought about studying improv. We do a little bit about it. So my podcast called The Obvious Choice is my attempt at kind of meshing like the Conan O'Brien podcast with business advice.
Okay.
And so the Conan O'Brien, you listen to the Conan O'Brien podcast?
I haven't, but talk to me about it. What is it?
He's good, man. Oh, I mean, Conan's great. Conan's one of my favorites. But Conan's the main guy, and he talks most of the time. But there's two other people on the podcast. There's Matt, who's kind of like the begruntled producer, and then there's Sona, who's like the fireball, like custom commentary, like makes you laugh, makes you smile, laughs a lot. And so Conan in and by himself would be funny, would be compelling, but when you mix those personalities together in that trio, it becomes something really, really special.
Mm.
And so I tried to create that on my podcast. So I'm the main guy and I teach. I probably speak about 80% of the time. And I come in there with topics, usually some sort of a presentation. We have a discussion about it. We have stories prepared. And then Ren, who is an ex R&B singer, sold insurance, turned personal trainer, brilliant, brilliant guy. Lived, oh my God, this guy has lived a lot of life. Funny as all hell, so fast, so good with metaphor. Jumps in and just adds this like looseness. Like he'll slow jam on the podcast, for example. And then Amber is the, so Len is a black guy from North Carolina. Len is like Bible Belt, South Carolina white woman, right? And she's kind of she's the producer of the show. And she probably speaks the least. And her position is like, how the hell did I get here with these fools?
Yeah.
But together, it creates something really special.
Mhm.
It creates something unique. Because yeah, you might click on a podcast, for example, because you're interested in the topic and you want to learn. And I think if it doesn't deliver on that, then you're not going to come back. But if that's all it does, you're also not going to come back. I think you need to be entertained.
Mm.
And the podcasts that I think are really going to thrive and that we're starting to see thrive are the ones that do that well. My First Million comes to mind there, where the hosts, Sam and Sean, just do a really good job educating and entertaining at the same time. And the interviews that they do with other people are by far and wide the worst episodes that they produce.
Oh, really?
Because the problem with an interview podcast is it's too heavily dependent on the guest. And any good guest is going to be on so many podcasts that you're not going to be interested in them anymore.
Mm.
And then you're going to have the majority of guests, even if they have something interesting to say, aren't really good at saying that thing because it's a different skill.
Like they're not entertaining and saying.
They're a researcher, they're an author, they're a business person. They're not a podcaster.
Mm.
So it gets really slow.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying, man. I mean, do you have any like favorite podcasts like all time, like hands down?
I mean, Conan O'Brien for sure is up there for me.
Hmm.
Um, his are funny, man.
How often does he release an episode?
A couple times a week.
And you're always on it?
I'm not always on it, but I'll listen to it when I'm doing the dishes and stuff like that. I
Hmm.
mean, I think My First Million does a great job. I don't listen to everyone. I listen to less and less because it gets to a point I feel like with anybody where you've heard them talk so much
Yeah.
that you're like, all right, I kind of get where they're going to go with this. Like even a new topic, it's like I know what approach they're going to take here.
Oh, okay.
So I'll still listen sometimes. Beyond that, I'm trying to think. There are certain episodes like, what were some of the really good ones? How I Write with David Perel did a great episode. The one with Morgan Housel was really, really good.
Hmm. Since you're a fan of comedy, have you ever checked out Andrew Schultz's his podcast?
Not his podcast. I've seen some of his stand up.
Yeah, yeah.
How long? I didn't even know he had a podcast. Does he produce one like new episode all the time?
Uh, I'd say it's like pretty frequent, yeah.
So does he just shoot the shit? What does he do on it?
Uh, on his podcast, I'd say honestly, he just uses his personality and he
Yeah.
carries a lot of it. But I guess he talks about all sorts of subjects, but it's mostly is just cracking jokes and stuff like that. Has
But that's why I like improv, because that to me is improv, right? They're just fast. They're
Mhm.
just so fast on it. And you can't, I feel like in this content environment where you have to produce so much volume, I think that the way to actually do it is to take what I call a whales and minnows approach. And that's like my central life philosophy is whales and minnows, which is basically free or expensive. Show up or don't show up. do a big thing or don't do a thing. And I think that's actually the best approach.
Okay, so I have a
Where,
good question for you.
yeah,
How does someone like a small creator who doesn't have as much like presence like keep up with those like big people that have like all the unlimited resources at their hands? Like they could get this guest whenever they want. They could do
sure.
this whenever they want. How does like a smaller person?
Well, you do what you're doing right now, which is you pound the pavement a bit. You send, I don't know how many messages you sent to people on Instagram saying, can we do this podcast thing where I come and cut your hair? And I don't know how many of them responded. My guess is it was a pretty low percentage. But some of them do. And now we're buddies. And now I'm in your corner. So that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to pound the pavement. I think number one. I think number two, though, is you keep focused on what you're doing and you do what those people who, once they make it big, don't have the ability to do. Most of them don't have the ability to really focus in on creating a piece of substantial work that
Like
is going to take a few years to produce.
like you don't think they have the quality there, if that makes sense? Like
I think that I don't think it has to do with quality. I think it's that there are now so many demands on their time, and it's so addictive,
Mhm.
either the financial rewards or, to be honest, just the social rewards.
Mhm.
It's so addictive to them to be everyone to everybody that they simply don't, they've, when you're unknown, you have the ability to really focus in and produce great work. When you're known, you largely, there's so much momentum against that, away from that. Where I look at any point in time, I'm always looking for, where do I have an advantage? Where do I have an element of leverage?
Mhm.
And specific to your question, where do you have an advantage is you're not known yet, which means by definition, you can move slower and more carefully, and you can produce great work in areas where they can't.
Mm. No, that's
Now,
actually
that doesn't mean that you should get away from the day to day, but I do think that that means that you should not be stressed about the day to day results, because success isn't linear. Success isn't 1% marginal gains every single day. I think that marginal gains, I think that 1% improvements are an in between thing. I don't think that they're the main thing. I think that success happens as an act of what I call lightning strikes or quantum leaps. Basically, you prepare for a while, you make a large coordinated effort in a very tight period of time, which acts as a lightning strike, which propels you to a new level. And then you do the day to day stuff to more or less maintain that level, now at a higher plane. Basically, you've made your old ceiling your new floor.
And you just keep going at it.
And you just keep going by that process systematically. But if you get so obsessed with the day to day metrics, you're never going to be able to do that. And if you actually pay attention to what large companies do, this is exactly what they do. Consider Apple, right? You're filming this on an Apple phone. Consider Apple. Apple doesn't market or advertise that much throughout the year. When do you ever, you might see the occasional billboard and stuff, but like not that much. Like day to day, they don't do that much. And then once or twice a year, they do a huge product announcement that gets tons of buzz. They get all the media, they get all the attention, they align all the resources in a very tight window to do a big lightning strike promotion. And then they basically stay quiet. They stay status quo. I wouldn't say quiet. They stay status quo for the rest of the time. And then they prepare for the next one. Facebook does the same thing with Fate, right? Most major companies, if you actually pay attention, follow that exact lightning strike model.
Okay, so you'd say a lot of like small preparations until they could release like the bigger.
You put in the reps day to day. I'll use a fitness analogy.
Mm-hmm.
You put in the reps day to day. But the majority of people like walk into a gym, walk into a Good Life here in Toronto and look around. The majority of people working out there don't look like they're in that good shape. And if you talk to a lot of them, you'll be surprised to find out that many of them have been showing up to that gym for years, reasonably consistently.
Mm-hmm.
And so why are they not in that good shape? Why do they not look like they're in that good shape? They're probably much more healthy, but they're probably not there for health markers. They're probably there because of some sort of aesthetic goal. They might not admit that to you, but secretly, unfortunately, that's why most of us do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is that the way to actually physically, like improve your physique, is to be consistent day to day with getting in movement wherever you can. Going for walks, doing light workouts, whatever it is, right? Going for short bike rides. And then choosing a pre selected time, call it 2 to 3 months. If you're newer, probably longer. If you're more advanced, a little bit shorter, where you really push it hard, where you challenge yourself, where you focus very tightly on your diet. You follow a really progressive and aggressive workout regime,
Mm-hmm.
and you be really consistent. And you do that lightning strike. Because what that will do is that will propel your physicality to a new level that then becomes your normal. So you'll peak and you'll come down a little bit, but that new level will be much higher than your old level. And then you might decide that you're going to just put in the reps for a couple months. And then you're going to do another lightning strike.
Okay.
Where you're going to do another 3 month really, really hard push. And so it's the same, I think, with creators. I think it's the same with business, where the day to day, the 1% improvements, the marginal gains, the putting in the reps, the showing up, the consistency is the in between thing. And I'm not downplaying it. I think that it's very, very important. But it's not enough to measurably transform yourself.
All right, man. Now that the haircut is done, I want you to give one piece of advice to all the viewers at home watching, to anyone who's trying to achieve something really big in their life.
Get out and explore a little bit more. And don't put too much pressure on yourself to do it too quick. Do interesting shit that allows you to view the world in a different way than other people. The way to thrive in an era of computers is not to become more efficient, is not to try to do things faster than somebody else, or even to create better than somebody else. I think it's actually to try to put together some combination of skills and experiences and attributes and network that would be impossible to replicate because it makes no sense. And I think that the power of making no sense is going to become stronger and stronger as we evolve technologically. And the value in that is going to grow as well. It's wishy-washy advice. There's no framework to that other than get out and do as many different things as possible, meet as many different people as possible. Don't be in such a rush. You will find, looking backwards, that the dots are going to connect in ways that you never could have anticipated, but come out in something quite beautiful.
Awesome, man. If you like this episode, guys, make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe down below. I'm going to leave my guy's stuff literally right here, so make sure you guys go check it out. Make sure you don't miss anything he's got going on, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.